Hello, Barry Johnson with Johnson's Coins here. In this video, we're going to go over a basic coin collection. Uh, about 5 months ago, I went to a coin show, and a lady come up, and her father was a coin collector, and he's pretty old right now, and she's his main caretaker, and so she had permission to move the collection. So she brought me a smattering of coins. I looked through them, made her an offer about $190. And I said, go talk to some of the other dealers here at this coin show and see what they offer you. And if mine's the highest offer, come on back. Well, she came on back a couple hours later, and I paid her $190. She came the next day and brought a few more, and I made her a good offer there. And then this last coin show about a month ago, she brought in quite a bit of stuff, and it came directly to me, and I went through it all, offered her about $2,000 for everything she had. And so I'm going to go through some of that collection here. He was a basic coin collector. The books that she brought were missing a lot of the better dates. The Indian head nickel collection was really nice. There's a few dates missing there, but he had most of those in there, and some of them pretty nice. That will probably be the subject of another video later on. But this video is just going to go through some of the basic Whitman coin folders, little blue books. If you have a collection that you've inherited that has some of those in it, those will look familiar to you, and we can go through and you can kind of figure out maybe some pricing from there. So let's get to the video. Okay, today I'd like to get into a little bit more organized type collections. We'll start with Indian head cents and work our way up through some half dollars, even some Eisenhower dollars. But this is a typical kind of folder that you might find that has been collected, and this is called a Whitman folder. They've made these for many, many years, and a lot of people like to get those, and they would plug the coins into them with their thumb and whatnot. You didn't want to do that with real nice uncirculated coins because your thumbprint will actually show up on the coins later on. Now, actually, this is the Indian head cent book, and you'll see that there's a lot of empty spaces in this one here. Whoever collected this did start off with picking up some of these. Probably didn't find them in his change. There's an 1860, 1862, and 63. These are made of copper nickel, as you can see right there. These books are handy. They had the mintage figures. They made 20 million, 28 million, and almost 50 million of the 1863. Fairly common. But of course, you don't see them in your change today. But these are worth about $6 to $8 a piece to a dealer. A dealer will have actually quite a few of those on hand because those are common enough to be seen. You'll see through the early 1860s, the 1870s, usually be blank in a common collection like this. Some of those can get pretty expensive. You'll see 1880 on up, mostly, and these are in pretty low grade, as you can see. Most of these, the 1880s, going to be worth probably about 50 cents to a dealer because he's going to have a lot of those. The 1890s, same deal. You can see these are pretty worn. The 1894 is a better date, but that's got a ding popping up. You can maybe see that on there. So that's going to take much value away from that. The 1909 is fairly nice. That's one of the better dates on that. You'll see the 08S and the 09S are missing. That's about a $80 on up, depending on condition coin, and this can be about a $400 on up coin. The 1877 is what they call the key. They made 852,000 of those. That one starts at about 700 in low grade and works up fairly well from there. So that's Indian head cents. Those that collected them just out of their change, you probably won't see too many of those. So after the Indian head cent, we went into the Lincoln cents. And as you know, they're still making the Lincoln cent today. This collection, as you can see, has a lot of the early dates missing. The Phillies, as you can see, like the 1910 here, they made 146 million of them. So those are still fairly common. 1909. We'll get into another video on what the VDB means and why that's on those and then disappears from the rest. That was the designer of the penny, Victor David Brenner. And they eventually took that off where he had his initials on there, but we'll talk as to why later on in future videos. So you can see a lot of blank spaces in the early teens. Some of them aren't that tough. This must be a secondary collection, I'm guessing, of this person that sold me this collection here. You'll see a few blank spaces in the 20s, the 24D, the 26S, 22D. Those are the key dates that are missing. And then you get into the 30s and the 31 through and 32s. And he's got a couple of the 33s here. Those are a little bit harder to find, but not much, worth $1.50 sometimes. It depends what they are. So this is a common average early book number one, if you will, of the Lincolns. And I think I ended up paying like $15 for that. I probably paid a little too much, but the collection was big enough that I wanted to pick up some other things. Now, the second book of the Whitman Folder starts in 1941, goes to about 74. And in 58, you go to the Lincoln Memorial. You can see they have some pretty nice ones in the late 50s, mid to late 50s, and then on into the 60s, and they're still actually pretty common, in real nice shape. People put away rolls of those. You'll see in the first page here that you've got the steel cents are in there. These are just your average condition. Most of the coins in this book are going to be worth, you know, the 2 to 3 cent type variety. I think I paid $15 for it because some of them look pretty uncirculated, and the steel cents weren't too awful bad. They weren't processed or anything like that. So, but most of those lower grade, a dealer's going to pay you 2 to 3 cents a piece for, and even less for the ones after 1958. Now, this is a nice collection here. First off, let me touch real quick on the spot prices. Today's the 17th of February. Gold went up a little bit from the last time by about 20 bucks, so it's 1902 today. 23.82 on silver, was actually a little bit less than last time. I'm going to base some of the silver quotations on this through 18 times face value with that number there. Now, this is a pretty nice collection of Indian heads. This guy must have enjoyed these. I'm probably going to spend a whole video just going over this book. You'll see that the 1913 raised ground, we'll talk about that later, is quite nice. The 1914 is a nice one. Even the 14S was quite a nice find in that. When you get later on, he's missing the 21S, but he does still have the 26S in here, but it's lower grade. You can just barely see the date on that. The 25D is a little bit harder date to find and so forth. But most of these dealers are going to pay you about 35 cents a piece for in average shape. The earlier ones, they'll be paying more. The 31S is a little bit harder date to find. They'll pay a little bit more for that. I ended up paying about $200 for this book from the collection that I bought, because the condition was pretty well on those. Now, prior to the Indian head nickels was the Liberty V. This collection has a scarcer date in it, in the 1894, but the reverse is worn down to where you can hardly see anything on that. You can't see that there's any the legend, the United States of America and whatnot on the outside of that. And so realistically, it's going to be hard to sell that for much more than $1. The 12D is a little bit better, but honestly, there's most dealers have 4 or 5, if not more, of those just sitting around. So these are average condition, about 25 cents a piece on those as well. Getting into the dimes, here's the Barber dimes. We talked about those in the first video. Most of these are worn down to just that same range. So you're looking at about $1.80 a piece on these dates. The 11S might be a little bit better. We'll talk about grading of those a little bit later, but realistically about $1.80 a piece on those. And the Mercury head dime, he worked on this a little bit. He has a couple little bit better dates on here. The key, what they call the keys, the 16D, that one in low grade, as long as you can tell that it is indeed a 16D, starts at $200 or $300 and goes on up from there. He's got some of the earlier mint marked ones. The 21 plain is a little bit harder one. This one's in pretty low grade. This one I'll probably try to sell for 20 bucks. I paid about $12 for that one. The 21D is a harder date to find. And the 1926S is a harder date. That one's pretty nice. Grade's right around fine. And I've looked these up in a book prior to this, and so I paid about $24 for that one. The 31D is a little bit better date. At books about $8 retail, I'd be paying about $5. And most of these fall into the silver category at about $1.80 a piece on those. The Liberty Standing Quarters. These are in this book. There's one nice one in here. Now, when they first made these in 1916-17, they put no stars under the eagle. Then they put it on later on. So that's how you can tell that's in 1917. That's the only way you can tell. Is you can see the date is totally worn off of both of these, but they are missing those stars. So you know those are 17s. But a collector really isn't going to want to put that in their book. With that. Now, the 1923, you can see that's got the raised date on that. And so we talked about that earlier, that the date was the first thing that would wear off on those up until 1924, and then they started to recess the date in 1925. So this one, pretty nice. Retail would be about $55, and I paid $33 for that one. Into the quarters. The person didn't bring the Washington quarter book with her, so these are just common. Most of them have seen somewhere. There are some that are pretty nice, but realistically, most of these are going to go for face value, maybe just a little bit more on a couple of dates on that, but there's not much extra value on those. Now, here's the Benjamin Franklin collection. Missing some of the, well, actually not really missing too many key dates. Here's the 49 plain and S over here. A little bit nice, but problem is these are in such average circulated condition that these are going to be worth about $9 a piece on that collection there. Over here we have the, next was the Eisenhower Dollars. And this person had 2 of these collected, and some of them are pretty nice. Some of them you can see obviously pulled out of circulation. This book doesn't put the 73s in here. They did make them, but they only put them in collector mint sets, and that was the only way to get the Philadelphia and Denver, so they didn't put that into these books. The Whitman people didn't. As you can see, this is an older book, because it stops in 1976, and they didn't mention the Type 2s, and the Eisenhower went on to 1978, and then stopped. But this book was printed only till 1976. So this collector picked up these folders back in the mid-70s on these. So a similar book, he had written in the Type 2. There's a little bit difference in the reverse. We'll get into those. Although it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference, they're still worth about the same. So most of these, a dealer pay about $1.25 a piece, if that much, on those, because that doesn't include the scarcer dates. Just a quick mention on people will also put together what's called typesets, and let's see, this is what's called a 20th century type. And so this starts 1900 on up, what kind of coins were in circulation. So you have a representative. The Indian heads were made at the first part of the century. Lincolns with the wheat cents, and then Lincoln memorials put on there. The Liberty heads went up to 1912, so that'd count. The Buffalo nickels, and then just average Jefferson, the Barbers, Mercury's, Roosevelt's, and then the Barber quarter, and so forth. So you can see this is what you call a typeset. Somebody just put these together and put them in the book. Now this guy was born in 1936 because this is his birth year. And so these are all dated 1936 that he'd put together. You see there's a couple of decent Morgan and a peace dollar. They've still seen a little bit of wear. 23 is a common date, so there's about your $25 a piece variety on those. The halves would be worth right around $9 a piece for that. So that's the 20th century. Now, if some people collected these older, he picked up a few. As you can see, the book's beat up pretty bad, but here's a 2-cent piece that was in the collection. This is what's called a half dime. Close inspection will show you that the half dime, let's see if I can get it down there, actually has a little hole in it that's been drilled right in the head of Lady Liberty, probably as a jewelry piece. If it wouldn't have been for that, it's a real nice shape. You can read the whole Liberty on the shield and so forth, but that hole is going to detract from it. Back when the nickels were started, 1866, they had the rays on them. So that's a variety. Then without the rays, 1867 to 83. Then there's the V-nickel with no cents, and they only did that in 1883. There's a whole story about how those were racketeered and gold-plated, and we can go into that in a future edition. And then here's the dimes as part of the typeset. They even made a 20-cent piece that's missing here, but the U.S. did make a 20-cent piece. They made half dimes. And then here's more in the typeset. Missing quite a few of the earliers. That Barber half is worn down. So most of these just based on the silver value, $25 a piece on the Morgan dollar. So that's kind of a basic collection that I picked up at a recent coin show. And so I appreciate you watching. We'll go into more in depth on certain issues later on in future videos. But appreciate you watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and like our place. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at johnsonscoins@gmail.com and leave a comment below. Appreciate you watching.